I'm done trying to live up to others' expectations. Family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that make us feel like we're in prison. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. Tired of the madness, done with the sadness. Gonna break free and be unleashed.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of Unleashed AF. I am your host, Deidre Beecham, with my co-host, Jenny Badig, right over there, the Interspace Engineer. And I just lost what I was saying. Holy cow, it just disappeared right in front of me. You think one of these days I'm just going to wing it. So we are here every single week to make sure that we bring forth programming that helps to release you from all the ties that are out there, keeping you leashed into wherever it is that you're stuck, and get bust out of there. Just bust on out. Bust out and be free. I'm a visibility catalyst, and I help high achieving women to overcome imposter syndrome and release your inner rebel. Yeah, your inner rebel. And this is my co-host, Jenny. Jenny, introduce yourself.
That's right. I am Jenny Badig, and I call myself the Interspace Engineer now because I started my career in human factors engineering and have spent the last 10 years actually as a hypnotherapist. So I know how to engineer things, and I know how the inner space works. And so we're excited to be doing this podcast together and bringing this content to you guys every week. And I wanted to mention, on our website, unleashedafpodcast.com, we do have a page basically where you can go that's called WWJDD for What Would Jenny and Deidre Do? And that's where you can submit any suggestions you have or questions so that we can make sure that we're bringing the content that's important to you guys. So that's an opportunity just to kind of give us feedback or suggestions. We also on there have an application on the website, unleashedafpodcast.com, where you can, if you'd like to be a guest that we interview because you have a special story or special technique or strategy that you'd like to share that you think can help other people. So those are the things that we have on our website for you to kind of stay engaged with us. But certainly as you watch the videos or listen to the pods, if you can make comments on them, like, share, follow, all those things so that we can get this podcast out to more and more people and make the ripple effects larger and larger in terms of helping women and people that have felt kind of held back, helping them to become unleashed.
Yeah, absolutely. And today I know we're going to talk about imposter syndrome. And this is something I am very, very passionate about. Let's put it that way. I'm very passionate about it. And the reason I'm so passionate about it is it is such a huge leash and is very, very much impressed upon women. You don't hear about it when you're talking about men. Men aren't told that they have imposter syndrome. Women are told they have imposter syndrome all the time. And what I think is at the core of imposter syndrome is nice girl training, what I call nice girl training. And I'm sure you've had a little bit of nice girl training yourself, Jenny. What do you think of when you hear the words nice girl training? What do you think about?
Just making yourself second class or less than the people around you. So you have to succumb to whatever is important to them. Just be nice. Don't say anything that might hurt their feelings. And don't say anything about your feelings that might disturb them or do anything. Don't make them feel less than. Make yourself feel less than.
Yeah, absolutely. And the crazy thing is, I know that I had this for a majority of my life, and I was able to kind of push it off to the side with what I call bravado.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had this like portrayal of this person because I was online. I was doing a lot of online work, and I also was speaking, and I worked for a sales company. And in that, so I saw visions of what people are supposed to look like online, how you're supposed to behave online, how you should be as a speaker. I mean, there's a whole industry of, Toastmasters, and this is how you speak. NSA, this is how you speak. And so it's all very regimented. And and so I thought, well, I must have to be this way. I must have to perform in some way. And so I made up this very bold persona of myself, and it was still a persona. It wasn't me. And what's crazy is how much this happens with high achieving women. I mean, I consider myself a high achieving woman, and at some point as I was going through this, I mean, I've there's just a plethora of I'm always needing to, is what you find with high achieving women, is they're always finding a need to get the next certification. Well, I can't do that. I'm not certified in that. Or I need to get a class in that. I can't talk about that until I have this. And so there's a reason why you can't, because you need to prove. There's this incredible need to prove your worth. It just drives me crazy, and it drove me crazy for years because I could never measure up to whatever it was that I was trying to be. And when the best thing in the world to be is just yourself.
Right.
Yourself. And that's but that's kind of like one of the hardest things in the world for some people.
Yeah. I think some people probably live their entire lives not knowing who they really are. Right. I'm sure some people get through their entire lives not ever getting a chance to crack that shell and really dive in to figure out who they really are, what really matters to them, what they really want. Because they have been so influenced by those outside pressures that we internalize them. I mean, it ends up feeling like it's internal, but it really starts external. In terms of expectations, and whether it's through family or society or your church or religious upbringing, whatever were your influences when you were young that told you can't be that, you need to be this way. This is the way that's accepted. This is the way that's right. And made it feel more black and white, where I can't even, I got to stay all the way over here. And I think it comes internalized and people, I think, don't even realize it.
Yes. And I think that on the one hand, it's one of the things that's so wonderful about the personal development industry is that you do have the opportunity to go out and get help for yourself if you want to. It's also one of the beautiful things about being an entrepreneur is because you have to face yourself. You have to face yourself and who you really are if you truly want to make it in business. Now, I'm not saying that you couldn't fake it to a point. I certainly did. And I did great staying right below the 6-figure mark, but I could not break past that. And so much of that was this nice girl training and it being kind of embedded. And where I really started thinking about this a lot more is with video. Because as you know, and I don't know if the audience knows, but I used to do videos for people. Most of my clients are female. And inevitably, to a fault, every single woman was making sure they looked absolutely perfect before the camera went on. And beside themselves about how they were going to appear and needing it to be perfect. I'm sorry, but we're just not perfect. But there was just this need. And so much of that comes from just this overwhelming thought of being judged.
Yep.
And
especially by physical appearance, right? That's probably more prominent with women than men, but it happens with men too. There are certainly men that fall into that trap where they think they have to be all muscly or buff or tan or whatever, or their hairstyle. That's a thing for some men. but it's definitely almost, it's extremely rare, I think, to find women who don't fall into that.
Yeah, well, from the time that you're born, right? Basically, women are told that their appearance is more valuable than their brains.
Yep.
Their whole life, even if nobody actually said that to you, you've been told that your entire life. Look at the cover of just about any major magazine. Look at who is idolized on TV. Look at the Kardashians. Holy mackerel, right? How about the beauty industry? Do you have any idea how much the beauty industry is worth was worth in 2023? Stab in the dark.
200 million.
Okay, we're going into the billions, and it's over $600 billion in 2023. And by 2038, they're anticipating the beauty industry to go well over $735 billion in just over 10 years from now. That's insanity.
Yeah. And that doesn't even include the fashion industry, right?
That's just beauty.
And so fashion is also mostly centered around women's fashion in terms of the expensive stuff, at least. And that's got to be up there too, which is, just imagine if all those resources were reallocated to something that was a little more substantial, like helping create clean water around the world and having everybody have.
Yeah, well, then we're getting into capitalism and
right.
but yeah,
there's that much out there.
Yeah,
and we've talked before about energy and where you focus it, and man, that's where money is a form of energy that's getting a lot of focus in that industry.
Yeah, and speaking of that, it's talking about words having energy and your desires having energy. One of the biggest crushers of women's power, right, is if you don't have something nice to say, how does it go?
Don't say anything at all.
Don't say anything at all. We've all heard it. Now, depending on your age, maybe you haven't. If you're younger, listening to this podcast, maybe not. But most women my age, Jenny's age, older, we've all heard it. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So if that neighbor says something racist, don't say anything because you have nothing nice to say about that. You have nothing nice to say to him. And so there's this constant don't say, don't talk, don't do, don't say when somebody else is doing something that is against you. And that's insanity. And even if you're really high achieving, and I see this especially with women that are high achieving, because I always thought when I was a kid, I was like, well, if I just achieve a lot, I won't feel like an imposter anymore. No, you still do. You still do, which is crazy. Yeah, I don't know. It's something that I really wish would get eliminated in the vernacular of what we tell our children, and especially what we tell women. It just shouldn't happen. Nobody should be saying if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Sometimes you have to say something that's not nice because people aren't nice.
Right.
You have to be able to stand up for yourself and stand up for other people. We're so worried about offending somebody that people are being persecuted. That people are being killed because we're afraid to say something.
Yeah. And this actually reminds me of a situation that happened several years ago when I was helping out with a group of kids. They were like preteens probably at that time. And I was going around the room having them share a story about themselves that they wanted, that kind of made them not feel so great. And let's see if we can try to turn that around and find something more positive about it or whatever, or what we can learn from it, that kind of thing. And so there was this one girl in the group that was explaining a story about how somebody at school had said something to her and it didn't make her feel great. And the boy next to her just kept bugging her and teasing her and stuff like that. And I was like, it's not your turn. Like, let her tell her story. And I said, that's rude. And he's like, it's not rude. I have ADHD. And I was like, I don't care that you have ADHD. That doesn't mean you have to be rude. That doesn't give you license to be rude to someone. I understand
Right.
if you can't like keep yourself still or whatever, but rudeness is a different thing than just using ADHD as an excuse to be rude to someone.
Yes, that's just crazy.
And I feel like that was, back ADHD wasn't a thing when we were growing up, right? Nobody knew what that was. It wasn't in the vernacular at all. And so I think if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, was the attempt from like our parents' generation, just to like, this is the quickest, simplest way to get your kid to behave. Just tell them if they don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Instead of individualizing the situations and saying there's a time and a place where you can share that information, not just shut your mouth up and forget it all together and let it go on. But that wasn't what we were told to do. It was, if you don't have anything nice to say.
Don't you think that also gets perpetuated by other things? There's other ideals. For example, go hug your uncle. I know you don't want to hug him. Go hug him.
Mm-hmm.
So the big thing that I see here, or the biggest problem that I see, is it's an issue of boundaries.
Yep.
So women's boundaries have been stripped away by these conventions, and they're just conventions that we grow up with and really don't question as a kid. Well, I kind of did, but it didn't matter if I questioned it because it was still the standard and you had to do it.
Yep.
And not speaking up for yourself, and having no boundaries goes into so many different areas. Quick story. A friend of mine, I was out at the beach with a friend, and she was talking about how she was so upset about something that had happened earlier in the week. It's like, oh, well, what happened? And she says, well, I have this rule. Oh gosh. So I have this rule. It's a good rule. I have this rule. And the rule is you can't come over to the house unless, she lives at the beach. I mean, she's right there at the beach. So she wanted to stop the influx of people just showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, so the rule is you don't come, you call me first.
Right.
And then I will let you know if it's good. And she says, so this person just shows up, a friend of hers, maybe even been a relative, doesn't matter, and showed up with a friend to show her this lady's house. No reason. She was just like, I have a friend who has a house on the beach. Oh, wow. I wonder where she lives. Oh, she's right over here. Let's go see it. She won't mind.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so here's the interesting thing that happens, right? She's like, well, she won't mind. Beach lady won't mind because she never does. She never minds.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the meantime, so this is her world. This is the imposing factor. That's her world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the meantime, my friend is going, made me so mad. She showed up, and I'm like, so what'd you do? Well, let her in.
Right.
Why'd you let her in? Well, she was here, and what am I going to do? Make her leave? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Because what good is your rule? What good is your boundary if you don't enforce it?
Right.
What good is it? And I know this seems like a silly, simple little thing, but this goes to so much about what happens in business and, people that take phone calls at 11 o'clock at night and then getting upset because they took a phone call at 11 o'clock at night. If you, as a business owner, don't want to take calls after 5 o'clock, then you don't take calls after 5 o'clock. That is your rule, your boundary.
Yep.
You get to decide.
Yep. And that should be an easy one. Right? I mean, just like her expectation of people notifying her first is completely reasonable. So it
Absolutely
shouldn't
reasonable.
upset the person that they get turned away when they don't
But of
follow
course
that
it
rule.
does. But of course it does. And here's the
But if it
thing.
does, that's on them.
Exactly. But here's the thing is that women that aren't used to putting those boundaries in place, women
Mhm.
who aren't used to that, when they do, they have to be prepared. You have to be prepared for the kickback, because every single time, if you haven't had strong boundaries, the very first time you put up a boundary, you're going to get so much kickback. Maybe not from
Mhm.
everybody, but everybody who has been used to taking advantage of the fact that you don't have boundaries
Yep.
is going to be all over it,
Yep.
all over it. And, but when you put a rule in place, you have to be prepared to stand up and say, absolutely, this is it. This is my rule, because I
Mhm.
have a standard. I have a standard of living. This is my space, and I protect my space. I protect my bubble around me. And there are only certain people who are allowed inside that bubble. Oh my gosh, it is thundering here. I don't know if you could hear that. That was really loud.
Yeah, I don't hear it at all.
Okay. But yeah, so putting those boundaries in place can be very difficult for some people
Yes.
to accept that you suddenly have boundaries.
Oh yeah. Certainly. I mean, it can be hard to stick to for the person putting the boundary up, especially when they're not used to it, but probably almost as hard for the people that are trying to break the boundary down because they're not used to having to deal with the boundary with that person. So
Yeah, and I
it's an adjustment on both sides.
yeah, and I can't remember who said this, and I just want to share it because it just popped into my head. Is that imposter syndrome? We touched on this in the beginning, but imposter syndrome one day it just got made up. It's like, boop, oh, you have imposter syndrome. That's why you're struggling. And it's the first thing that's told women when they start to feel uncomfortable, especially if you're in a new position or new role, especially if you're trying to do something on your own. This doesn't happen as much inside of corporate, although it does happen. You get into a new role, maybe you're a new manager, or you've got a new business, and it feels uncomfortable, because it's going to, because it's going to feel uncomfortable. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is. If you don't have the reps behind it, if you don't have the chops behind it yet, it's even if you are the most brilliant at what you do, if you're in a new role, you're going to be uncomfortable. And the first thing that a woman gets told is, imposter syndrome. And so now the woman's going, oh, imposter syndrome. Well, let me look that up. And so we're looking up imposter syndrome. And so now, what is imposter syndrome? Oh, it's doubting that you have the capability to, do I doubt the capability to do what I'm doing? I don't think I doubt the capability. And then there's this whole ruminating of, it's not imposter syndrome. You're just uncomfortable. You just haven't gotten your reps yet. Push through the discomfort. It's so much of it is having the courage and conviction that this is my thing. This is my jam. You know, when I woke up one day and I said, you know what, I'm going to make a one-woman show. You can't tell me that, that's a little scary. Of course, that's a little scary. I've never done that before. People keep asking me, oh, so are you an actor? No. Oh, you must be a singer. No. I sing in the shower.
Right.
But no, it's just, well, how do you know you can do it? Because I believe in myself. Because I feel it in my bones. Because I have a vision for it. And that's how you get somewhere. That's how you get to the next step.
Yep.
People with imposter syndrome, women who say that they have imposter syndrome or believe they have imposter syndrome, there's this thought that I have to have a clear path to get to the next place. Or I want $1 million, and so I'm going to do these things to get to the $1 million, and then I'll feel great. Well, no, you got to feel great now.
Right.
You have to believe that that is possible and be that person before you get it. It's a misnomer to think that, well, I'll go get the really nice clothes when I get the $1 million. you need the nice clothes now. I'm not talking about, tricking out your whole closet, but if
Right.
you've got to present yourself the
Yep.
way you want to be in the world. If you wake up and you're like, wow, I am $1,000,000. I just need to open up the portals to let this all in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you walk a different way. You
Yeah.
are a different way because you are being different.
Yeah. And so let me run this by you, because as we're talking about that, the other thing that is, I think can be linked to imposter syndrome is fake it till you make it.
Oh,
However,
I have things to say about fake it till you make it. Please go, please.
yeah. So, but as I thought about that, I thought that might be more the masculine side of imposter syndrome, because they don't have the same things about, well, you're a woman, so you're less than or whatever, because of the patriarchal society really that's prevalent in most countries and societies in the world. But I would argue that part of why it's so important to hold on to that balance of supposed power is that they're faking it, because they really don't know. They're impostoring, but it's an acceptable impostoring.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that you're bringing this up. So it's really interesting. Last week, I met a gentleman last Saturday, and he was talking about how was actually a receiver of Nice Girl training as well. And we had a really great conversation about his Nice Girl training. And he's a very straight man. He's married, but it was great.
Yeah.
And he was very open about this. And then he said this. He said, when I got married, I did not realize just how much privilege I had as a man. He said, I am your average looking white guy. I'm your average looking white guy. And I had average skills. And yet I just walk out and I say, this is what I want to do. And it gets handed to me.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody expects that I'll be able to make it. He says, I have women. He says, my wife, she's brilliant and is constantly being criticized every time she tries to take a step out. And she's way more brilliant and yet doubts herself constantly, but she's constantly being told she should be doubting herself.
Yep.
That's imposter syndrome. You are told that you're supposed to doubt yourself.
Right.
And men are told, just fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Fake it till you make it. The problem is when women are told the same thing, it falls flat on its face because it doesn't work.
Right.
Society is not set up for it to work for you to fake it until you make it. And at some point, you'll come to a battle inside of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not a matter of faking it till you make it. You have to be that person. You have got to be that person and stand in the space of who that person is, whoever that version of you is that you want to be.
Right.
Be that, become that, and success will come towards you.
Yep.
Okay, that's kind of getting into the science of getting rich.
Right. But it applies.
But it all ties together. It
Yeah.
all ties together.
Yeah. And
But
I think, there are some people, like you were talking about, especially as an entrepreneur, it's difficult or you have to kind of face it as an entrepreneur to be successful. I think there are still people who are able to kind of have their own business and be very successful if it's a superficial kind of business that doesn't really require them to represent
Absolutely.
them authentically. But when you're into like the softer services, self-improvement type stuff, healing type stuff, services really versus products or something like that, people can still get away with going their whole lives without having to deal with it, at least in a serious way.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you absolutely. But not doing things like hypnotherapy or
Right.
coaching, or something where you are personally getting it, having an effect on other people's lives. It's
Right.
so imperative that you are continually growing and pushing past these boundaries. And so much of it is that nice girl training and just overcoming that and pushing that out of the way. And the best way to do that, truly, in my opinion, is to find out what it is, because we don't fight against it when we're getting something from it. Right. So even if it's uncomfortable, and that may be what we're getting from it, it's like, well, I'm comfortable with being uncomfortable, and so that's why I don't grow through this. So it's finding out, why is it that you're still comfortable being uncomfortable, and then get down to the root of loving yourself. Because if you truly do love yourself, all the way down to the root, warts and all, darkness and all, and amazing things about you as well, that you love all of it. And if you do that, be so secure in who you are and who you know yourself to be, that being whatever it is, however you see yourself in the world, and you become that, and things come to you, it's just so much easier. And it's so much easier when somebody says, oh, I don't like that about you. And you go, so? Because I do, and so do all these people. And it's not that you would necessarily say that, but in your head, you're like, so what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
And yet that's one of the hardest things to do.
Another visual that came to me as you were describing that is when you do the work to figure out, to kind of break out of the imposter syndrome and really step into your true, authentic self, you're like a solid brick. Before you do that work, it's just like the outer lining.
Shifting sands.
Well, I mean, there can be a structure, right? And like I'm saying, people, especially like going back to like the men's side of things, fake it till you make it. It could be a house of cards where it's built pretty high, but one poke the wrong way could potentially make it fall down because it's not built on anything solid. But when you've done the work and you know who you are, it's solid. So it's much more difficult to really break it down.
Yeah. And I want to put a quick note out here, because all of Nice Girl training is all based around shame, right? It's shaming you into making yourself small, shaming you into not speaking, not acting out, not whatever it is. It's all shame based. And I just want to say, if you are older, I'm 50. We figured this out the other day. I'm 56. I'm 56. And I just want to share that if you are experiencing imposter syndrome, or, for example, I have who I believe in my family to be narcissists. And I know when I finally confronted somebody in my family earlier this year, I'm 55 at the time, and I thought, isn't this crazy to be over half a century old, over half a century on this planet, and still considering this other person as somebody to react to. Narcissists treat children like adults, and they treat adults like children. Now, it's very simplistic. There's so much more to it. There's so much more to it. But that's a really basic thing. And so when I understood this, and I didn't understand this until I had already kind of cut ties, but it's really interesting to think about, is that I was still concerned about this person and about what they thought of me, and trying to make this person happy. No, it's a parental type figure. So I just want to share, if you are one of those people where you're old and you're like, oh, I shouldn't still be dealing with this, first, stop shitting on yourself. Stop shitting on yourself. And it's okay if you have, if this is where you are, you're always exactly where you're supposed to be. But recognize for what it is and start taking care of yourself and start standing up for yourself. And sometimes standing up for yourself and being able to deal with imposter syndrome is all about cutting off somebody. Sometimes that's what has to happen.
Yeah.
There has to be a cutting off, a cleaving, because you cannot be a new person. You cannot step into this person you're supposed to be without cleaving things. Sometimes it's people, sometimes it's attitudes within yourself, sometimes they're thoughts that you have to get rid of, which is why I love your hypnotherapy tapes, because that was something I really struggled with, especially with narcissistic abuse and imposter syndrome and people pleasing problems and nice girl syndrome. And I mean, it just goes on. And having a hypnotherapy tape that helped to retrain my thinking, brilliant and beautiful. So I just want to share with you, if you're out there and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know, I'm so ashamed, I'm in my 60s and I still have this person that kind of has I allow them to have some control over me. Just recognize it and stop. But also know there's a cost. There's always a cost. To me, it's worth it for me to have my sanity and for me to love myself. And if that means I lose this person or they say mean things about me, okay.
Yeah.
because I'm good with me. I love me. My wife loves me. There are other people that love me. And the same thing for you. So I just felt the need to share that. I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of takes it back to the 4 agreements.
Oh, love
by
that.
Don Miguel Ruiz, right? One of the agreements is say what you mean and mean what you say, which is all about being authentic.
Yeah. And just a quick note here, because you brought that up, is people who are people pleasers, what happens is you start breaking agreements with yourself.
Yep.
And you're breaking agreements with yourself because you're trying so hard to make other people happy.
Right.
And so if there's a problem, one of the things that you can start doing is just make a promise to yourself that you're going to do, and then do it. And it can be something so small. It doesn't have to be some huge, big, drawn out plan. I'm going to write a book and I'm going to get up every single day and I'm going to write it from this time to this time. Don't do that. If you aren't at that place, don't do that, because discipline is really, really difficult for people pleasers. So you can start by just doing something really small. Maybe if you're having trouble getting up at a certain time, you say, well, I'm going to do this tomorrow. And then be grateful for yourself. Be grateful to yourself for having done that. If you want to push this into the manifestation realm, you could say, well, my future self, I want to get up at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, and picture yourself getting up at 6 a.m. I mean, this is a silly example, but it works. Just pick something. Okay, I'm picturing myself, I'm being grateful for myself for getting up in the morning. Okay, and the next morning when your alarm goes off at 6 o'clock and you actually get yourself up, recognize, oh, I got myself up, and then look back at your previous self and go, oh, thank you so much for manifesting that I would get up at this time. And you can turn that into bigger and bigger things, getting into the manifestation area. But anyway, it all ties together. All of it. All of it ties together.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing that is a good link to the 4 agreements that I mentioned that is helpful to keep in mind, and this is good for not just for imposter syndrome, but for other issues too. But when you start to put up those boundaries and then realize that there's going to be other people who aren't used to you having your boundaries up, so they might react in a kind of messy way. The agreement, don't make assumptions about how and why other people do the things they do, because it's like 90% about them and maybe only 10% about you and what you did. So not allowing that to fall on you as a guilt thing because they're reacting in a weird way. Like I said, the person that might have gotten turned away by your friend at the beach, if they react to that, that's on them. It's not on
Right.
her for keeping her boundaries.
Yeah,
So, but
and
it's
she
hard.
yeah, and that's the thing that stops us, right? And that's what's the thing that stopped her, and she's like, "Well, but then she'll think bad things about me." So what?
Yeah.
So what? Well, then she'll say bad things about me to people in my family. So? If you keep a standard of ethics for yourself, if you have a standard of living and people around you know that, and I don't mean your house, I mean just about who you are, you have a
Mhm.
standard, whatever that standard is. People allow around you, once they understand that, will love you and respect you for that. It's the people that aren't in your inner circle who are used to taking advantage of whatever that is, they're gonna get upset, but when they go and tell your inner circle, it's not gonna matter because your inner circle
Right.
knows you.
Right. It
And
bounces off.
outside of your inner circle, who cares?
Mhm.
You know, I had somebody tell me, because I was talking about this, and they're like, "Well, I care because I have a business. I care. I care. So what if somebody says something in business and I don't get that client?" Well, then you probably wouldn't have had that client to begin with if they're gonna be so influenced by something like that without having talked with you, without having
Right.
spent time, without looking at your content and getting to know you, or even asking you a question, "Hey, a friend of mine said such and such," and getting that person's side of it. And there's so many people. Why are you worried about this one person? There's so many people out there. If
Right.
you keep your energy at a place that rings in with their energy, they're going to be your client.
Mhm.
And they're not even going to listen to this lower level because that, all of these things are on energy levels too. And
Yep.
so a person who's going to think like that is going to be on a lower energy level. So you keep yourself up at an energy level. This stuff isn't even going to affect you because whoever they're talking to, they're on a lower energy level. I wish I had that video. Maybe see,
Oh,
we're having an emergency alert. It's really bad here.
yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Sorry.
um, anyway, energy level, it people down here at this level, you're not even going to be affected by any of that. Oh, I know. I was talking about that video. There's a video about, let's see, if something at 424 hertz, and then another sounding tuning fork at, I don't know, 5. I don't know what the numbers are.
Yeah.
And you hit one, and the other one just sits there. And then if you get the same tuning fork at a higher level and then hit it, then the other one just goes crazy. And so
Mhm.
it's the same thing with our words, it's the same things with our actions, the same things with who we are.
Yep.
And you'll even notice that as you raise your vibration level, you get to higher and higher levels of being and healing yourself. Different people start showing up in your world. And there are other people that just kind of go away because they're just not at that level that you're at.
Yeah.
They can't even hear you.
Yeah. Yeah. And one situation that I had happen recently is that really made me feel good, and I didn't even know it was going to happen. So, but it was kind of a demonstration of I was solid with who I was, and it helped me out. Um, when we were looking at a new place to move into, and it was dealing with a local landlord or landlady. Of course, there was an application to fill out and stuff like that. But before we even went over and looked at the place, she had already checked us out on Facebook and found out that we had common friends and had
Mhm.
gone and talked to those friends. And so she was already like ready to lease to us just based on the good things that people who know us said to her
Right.
without us. Like, we didn't provide references. We didn't say, oh, go talk to this person because I know they're going to say something good about me. It was a really nice feeling and kind of a pleasant surprise. I was like, oh, there you go. We kind of passed the test without knowing we were taking it, which is way more comfortable than getting upset about, oh my God, why'd you talk to that person? Well, here's why they don't tell me, like if
Yeah.
things are a little more crumpled in your house of cards, then that's the direction you go. Right. She'd
Yeah.
question, I don't know if I'm not sure if I'd want to lease to you guys because I got some bad feedback. Well, wait a minute, who'd you talk to? Getting on the defensive right away and all that stuff. So it was so nice to really have done work like that for both of us and know that, wow, without even having to make an effort, our actions, our personalities, our intentions spoke for themselves. So it's an empowering feeling, even though it has meant putting up boundaries and establishing certain things. We're not out there yipping it up, partying with everybody so that everybody knows us. We're solid people. The people that know us know us. So it was just a nice feeling. And it's not, we don't always know when those kinds of things are going to come up, but the more you can feel solid in who you are and what you put out into the world, it just doesn't feel as intimidating to think that something like that might happen. Oh, what if somebody's checking up on me? Well, what are you hiding? Like if you're authentically who you are, then you should be good.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I don't have anything else right now, unless you have any other questions. I could talk about this for hours. So I know we're getting towards the end of our
Right.
hour here.
Well, one thing I was thinking as we were talking about this is it might be good to do either a series of podcasts on the 4 agreements or just talk about all of them in one episode or something. But that's one of those just basic bits of, if you can understand this
Mm-hmm.
and kind of live to these agreements, that makes so much of life more like relaxing, more comfortable, more just, it's easier.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we save that for the first episode in August?
Okay.
And I know that we have our sponsor we're going to do real quick, and then we'll come back and finish up today's episode, and we'll let you guys know what next week's episode is all about.
Yes. So we just want to recognize our affiliate sponsor, Osreen Natural Skincare. It's a woman-owned business locally here in Brevard County, Florida. It's got 100% natural and handmade skincare products. So I've used them myself. I can attest to the fact that they were helpful in terms of a wound that I had that was healing not as fast as I wanted it to and healed much faster when I started using this product. You can get 10% off these products when you go to Osreen Skincare, which is AUSRINE skincare.com/unleashedafpod and use the discount code unleashedafpod for 10% off.
Awesome. And next week we actually have it pre-recorded because I'm going to be out of town, but we do not want to we don't want to miss an episode. So next week we're going to have Amber Powers, and we had a powerful interview with her. She wrote a book called Untethered. I don't remember what the subtitle is, but it's about her getting unleashed from a cult. She grew up in a cult and left that, and then wrote this book. And it was a very profound unleashing, writing the book, because talk about antagonizing her family. She was told very forcefully, this is going to damage your relationship with her family. And she still did it. And it was a really, really cool interview. So we look forward to bringing that to you next week. You have anything else for us, Jenny?
Not that I can think of. There definitely part of her story goes to nice girl and imposter syndrome and all that kind of stuff as well. And I guess the other thing I was thinking earlier is it'd be nice if we didn't have to call this a syndrome, because that kind of makes it seem like it's something you got and you're going to have. It's just something that is a
and I don't think it should be there at all. It's just uncomfortable when you get into something else. If you know your stuff, you know your stuff. I think I would personally like to call it what it is, which is just it's people pleasing. It is a
Mhm.
lack of trust in yourself and not understanding that it's okay to be uncomfortable and to push through being uncomfortable. Doesn't make you an imposter.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really more of a leash. It can be broken away from or broken through, or
And
maybe,
it can be like that. It can be a decision. It's not something that has to take forever and ever and ever. It is a decision.
right.
But anyway, thank you so much for joining us this week. We look forward to having you with us next week. Again, we have Amber Powers with us next week. And, excuse me, we hope that you will keep going forward every single week, finding the leashes that are keeping you stuck and just breaking free from them. This has been Deidre Beekman with my co-host, Jenny Vadig. Take care. Until next week, I have the outro right there.
I'm done trying to live up to others' expectations. Family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that make us feel like we're in prison. I'm ready to be